Something just cracked wide open inside the WNBA, and the people responsible for managing the fallout are quickly running out of places to hide. Two referees who worked a game involving Caitlin Clark have had their identities publicly exposed, and those names are now circulating across major national news platforms, including Fox News: Gina Cross and Angelica Suffren. Remember those names because right now they sit at the center of one of the most damaging controversies this league has ever faced. And the scrutiny directed at both of them has reached a level the WNBA simply cannot continue to dismiss or quietly manage from the shadows. This is not a fringe internet conversation. This is not a small pocket of frustrated fans venting on social media. This is a full-scale, nationally visible crisis that has landed the league's entire officiating apparatus directly in the middle of a mainstream media cycle. And Commissioner Kathy Engelbert is the one who is going to have to answer for all of it. But to understand why this moment is so significant, you have to understand exactly what happened on that court. And more importantly, what didn't happen. It was June 25th, 2026. Indiana Fever versus the Phoenix Mercury. A loose ball scramble in the second quarter, and Caitlin Clark ends up on the floor. What happened next was captured on video, slowed down, and sent flying across every platform on the internet within hours. Alyssa Thomas, Phoenix Mercury All-Star, 13-year veteran, one of the toughest and most physical players in the league's history, thrust her closed fist directly into Clark's throat area as they scrambled for the ball. She then got up and stepped right over Clark, who was still on the ground. No reaction, no acknowledgement, no "my bad," nothing. And the referee standing with a direct, unobstructed line of sight to that moment, she didn't blow the whistle. No foul, no stoppage. The game just continued. The league eventually reviewed the footage and handed Alyssa a one-game suspension, officially classifying the contact as a flagrant foul 2, language the WNBA described as Thomas recklessly making contact with her fist to the throat area of Clark, a non-basketball act. One game. A single-game suspension for a closed-fist strike to the throat of the most commercially valuable player this sport has ever seen. One game. The response from commentators, analysts, former players, and fans was almost universal, and almost uniformly the same word: inadequate. Fever head coach Stephanie White didn't hold back for a single second after that game. We have a generational talent and a WNBA superstar who had two cheap shots right there that weren't called. Absolutely unacceptable. The fist in the throat is crazy. It's crazy. It's dangerous. White had been here before. She'd been saying variations of the same thing for 2 full years. But what she said next cut even deeper. We spent all offseason looking at officiating, and I still say the one thing we keep asking for is consistency. She is not called the same way as everybody else is called. But the suspension debate, as loud as it got, is actually the secondary story here, because the suspension at least acknowledges that something wrong happened. The officiating failure? That's still sitting there completely unaddressed. And that's what pushed this thing all the way to Fox News. Angelica Suffren was positioned with a direct and unobstructed line of sight to the contact. There is no ambiguity about this. The video makes it plain. She was right there. And the whistle stayed silent. Now, missed calls happen in every sport, at every level. Referees make mistakes, angles are imperfect, timing is difficult. Every person who has ever watched a game understands this. That's not what this conversation is about. What this conversation is about is something the league cannot explain away as a bad angle or a split-second judgment call, because Suffren was not at a bad angle. She was not caught off guard. Reports indicate the game officials told Fever coach Stephanie White after the game that they simply did not see what Thomas did. They didn't see it. Standing right there with a clear view, they didn't see it. That answer raised more questions than it answered, and the public started asking those questions very loudly. Suffren's name and image began circulating nationally, alongside coverage raising serious questions about her conduct and her suitability to officiate professional basketball at any level. A video reportedly linked to her, the authenticity of which has not been independently verified, added additional public scrutiny to her profile and intensified the attention on her role in the game where Clark was struck without a foul being called. Whatever the full context of that video, its circulation made the story significantly larger and significantly more personal. Gina Cross is facing the same level of public scrutiny. Both names, previously known only within league and officiating circles, are now attached to a national conversation about whether the WNBA's officiating structure is equipped to fairly and consistently protect its players, and whether specific referees have demonstrated patterns of behavior that warrant formal investigation. These are not fringe questions being asked by angry fans online. These are being asked by journalists and commentators on major national platforms, and the league has not answered them. Here's the part that makes all of this so hard to dismiss. This didn't come out of nowhere, not even close. Since entering the WNBA in 2024, Caitlin Clark has been on the receiving end of more flagrant fouls than any other player in the league. 9 flagrant fouls across 72 career games, 1 every 8 games, according to data tracked by Across the Timeline. That is the most of any player in that same time frame, by a significant margin. But the number itself isn't the most revealing part. The pattern of how those fouls were handled is. Since Clark's debut, there have been only 4 other flagrant 2 fouls called in the entire league. All 4 were called immediately, in the moment, during the game, resulting in immediate ejections. Every single time it happened to Clark, including the Thomas incident, it was not called during the game. It required post-game review and retroactive upgrading. Every single time. That is not a coincidence. That is a pattern, and it's a pattern that the league's own officiating apparatus produced, game after game, for 3 consecutive seasons. Go back to her rookie year. Chennedy Carter delivered a shoulder and hip check to Clark away from the ball during an inbound play. Clark wasn't even holding the ball. The officials called it a common foul. The league upgraded it to a flagrant 1 the next day. Carter refused to address it in her post-game press conference. "I ain't answering no Caitlin Clark questions." No suspension. Later, that same rookie season, Diamond DeShields charged nearly full speed into Clark like a linebacker, sending her flying horizontally and sliding across the hardwood. Clark shrieked in pain. The foul was upgraded to a flagrant 1 after review. And just weeks after the Carter incident, a play involving Jonquel Jones left Clark with a ruptured eardrum, though Clark herself called it a great screen and said it was her fault for not hearing her teammates. Then, in 2025, Marina Mabrey shoved Clark to the ground. The league upgraded it retroactively, again, to a flagrant 2, and Clark, who suffered 4 separate muscle injuries across that second season, was eventually ruled out for the rest of the year, including the playoffs. Angel Reese struck Clark in the head during a 2024 game. In a different incident, Reese's teammate, Chennedy Carter, hip-checked Clark during a dead ball situation where Clark wasn't even remotely involved in the play. Reese leaped off the bench clapping after the Carter foul. The Chicago Sky organization was fined $5,000 for failing to ensure player media availability afterward. Carter was not suspended. Sophie Cunningham, Clark's teammate, said it plainly on her podcast after the Thomas incident. "The league and refs do nothing to protect Clark," she explained. "None of the Fever players even saw the throat strike happen in real time. That's how fast and chaotic it was. None of our team saw it happen, because I promise you, if we would have seen that happen, we would have had her back," Cunningham said. And then she said what everyone watching had been thinking for 3 years. The officials do nothing. The league does nothing. Not in real time. Clark herself, back in her rookie season, said something that aged painfully well. "I think at this point I know I'm going to take a couple of hard shots a game, and that's what it is. I'm trying not to let it bother me." She said that in 2024. She is now in her third year. The hard shots haven't stopped. The officiating hasn't changed. And now the story has left women's basketball media entirely and landed somewhere no one in league leadership wanted it to go. Let's talk about what this league actually has, because if the people running the WNBA fully understood what they were sitting on, none of this would have been allowed to happen. When Caitlin Clark went down with a strained quad injury early in the 2025 season and missed 5 games, the numbers that came back from Nielsen were stunning. Nationally televised WNBA viewership dropped 55% from the moment of her injury. The Indiana Fever's national TV games averaged 1.81 million viewers before the injury and 847,000 afterward, a 53% collapse. That is not a normal distribution of viewership across a league's roster. That is near total commercial dependence on a single individual's presence to sustain the broadcast product. And it didn't stop there. The 2025 WNBA All-Star Game, held without Clark due to a groin injury, drew 36% fewer viewers than the 2024 All-Star Game, despite still being the second most watched in the event's entire history. When Clark plays, the numbers are historic. When she doesn't, they fall off a cliff. Sports betting activity for Fever games dropped roughly 50% during Clark's absence, according to BetMGM data. This is the commercial reality the WNBA is operating inside. The league recently signed a $2.2 billion media deal, the kind of number that would have been unimaginable for women's professional basketball just a few years ago. That deal was built in enormous part on the ratings story that Clark's arrival created. The league is not just popular because of her. The league's financial transformation is almost entirely attributable to her. And every game in which she is subjected to unpenalized, unaddressed physical targeting is a game in which the league is gambling with the very foundation that deal was built on. When you look at those numbers, the failure to protect Clark stops being just an ethical failure. It becomes a catastrophic business failure, one that compounds every time a referee misses a call, every time a suspension comes back at 1 game when it should have been 5, and every time the commissioner's office responds to a national scandal with silence. That brings us to the question that keeps coming up in every serious conversation about this story. Where is the commissioner? Kathy Engelbert, or Kathy Engelbert, as her name is also commonly rendered, has not appeared publicly to address the officiating controversy with anything approaching the directness this moment demands. The league issued a statement regarding Thomas's suspension. The Fever issued their own statement emphasizing player safety. But on the specific question of the referees, on Angelica Suffren's position during the play, on the process by which officiating failures are investigated, on whether any formal review of Gina Cross and Suffren has been initiated, there has been institutional silence. This is not the first time the commissioner's public profile during a period of crisis has been notable primarily for its absence rather than its decisive engagement, and that pattern of retreat is precisely what has allowed the officiating problem to escalate to where it currently sits. Consider what the league did heading into the 2025 season. An entire off-season task force on officiating, new points of education for officials with a special emphasis on freedom of movement. Leadership was publicly pleased with the early results. Foul calls were ticking upward. Things looked improved. And then the Mercury Fever series happened, a chippy back-to-back in which the first game produced 6 technical fouls and an ejection. Clark picked up her 5th technical of the season in a call the Fever unsuccessfully petitioned to have reversed, and the second game ended with a closed fist to the throat, no whistle, and a nationally circulating controversy that landed on Fox News within 48 hours. The task force didn't fix it. The public optimism didn't fix it. And now there are 2 referees whose names and images are being discussed on national news platforms while the league office remains publicly quiet. Clark herself was fined $200 last September for an Instagram comment criticizing referees after the Fever's playoff win. She responded by joking about the fine on social media. Her teammate Sophie Cunningham offered to start a fundraiser. It was funny in the moment, but the underlying reality it reflected was not funny at all. The league's star player was being financially penalized for publicly criticizing officiating, while the officials responsible for the pattern she was criticizing faced no equivalent accountability. Her brother, Colin Clark, posted on social media that the refereeing was directly responsible for her season-ending injury. Make no mistake, this is on the reffing. He deleted the post, but a lot of people had already seen it. The questions Engelbert needs to answer are not complicated. They are the basic infrastructure questions any credible professional sports organization must be able to answer transparently. What is the WNBA's formal process for investigating referee conduct when credible allegations of pattern-based officiation failures are raised? What mechanism exists within the league structure for holding officials accountable when their decisions, or their failures to make decisions, result in documented physical harm to players? And specifically, what investigation, if any, has been initiated regarding Gina Cross and Angelica Suffren? Those questions have not been answered, and the vacuum that silence creates fills itself with exactly the kind of chaotic, reputationally damaging coverage that is now playing out across mainstream media. Fox News does not, under ordinary circumstances, cover WNBA officiation controversies. That is simply not part of their programming footprint. When a story about a specific referee's conduct in a professional women's basketball game migrates to Fox News and stays there, it tells you something very specific and very important. The audience engaging with this controversy is no longer limited to dedicated WNBA followers. It is the broader American sports-watching and news-watching public. People with no prior investment in the league's internal officiation debates, people who are, right now, in real time, forming their first impressions of whether this league operates with integrity and whether its leadership understands its own responsibilities. Those impressions are being formed right now, and the league's continued failure to respond with urgency and transparency is actively shaping those impressions in a direction that serves no one inside that organization well. The Mercury's own head coach, Nate Tibbetts, made the situation even messier when he publicly claimed that Thomas's suspension was based on social media screenshots rather than a proper league investigation. That comment, whatever its intent, communicated to every watching outlet that even the team of the suspended player believed the league's process was inadequate and reactive. That is not a message the league can afford circulating in a mainstream media cycle that is already skeptical of its institutional competence. Caitlin Clark is now in her third WNBA season. She is averaging a career-best 21.2 points per game, 8.2 assists, 4.0 rebounds. After an injury-destroyed sophomore campaign in which she barely played, she came back in 2026 and has appeared in 17 of Indiana's first 18 games. The product, when she is healthy and on the floor, is better than it has ever been. She has never complained publicly in a way that made the league look bad. She has not called out specific players by name. She said in her rookie year she knew she was going to take hard shots every game and was trying not to let it bother her. That is not a person looking for drama. That is a competitor who wants to play basketball, and the league has repaid that composure by fining her for an Instagram post, allowing pattern after pattern of unpenalized physical targeting to continue season after season, and now watching helplessly as the names of its own referees circulate nationally as symbols of institutional failure. Every game where Clark absorbs unpenalized contact is a game where the league is rolling the dice on the single factor that is keeping the sport in front of a mass audience. One serious injury, and she has already sustained 4 separate muscle injuries in a single season, and those ratings numbers, that $2.2 billion media deal, that sold-out arena story, all of it is sitting in extremely fragile territory. The ratings data from her 2025 injury absence was a warning, a clear, unmistakable, statistically documented warning. More than half the audience disappeared when she wasn't playing. That is not normal. That is a league whose commercial existence is dependent to an extraordinary degree on one player being healthy, present, and playing at her best. The officials responsible for protecting that are central to the league's financial future in a way that simply cannot be minimized or dismissed. Gina Cross and Angelica Suffren are now public figures attached to a national story about a referee standing in direct proximity to a documented act of physical aggression who allowed play to continue without a whistle. That story is documented. The footage exists. The post-game admission that the officials did not see the contact exists. The retroactive suspension that implicitly confirms something serious happened exists. All of it is on the public record. The WNBA now faces a binary choice. Kathy Engelbert can continue the pattern of institutional minimization, issue a suspension, hope the news cycle moves on, avoid direct engagement with the officiating controversy, and delay the reckoning while the credibility damage compounds quietly in the background. Or she can step forward, address the officiating failure directly, announce a formal and transparent review of the officials involved, and demonstrate through concrete action that the league understands the magnitude of what is happening right now and what is at stake if it doesn't change. The second option is the only one that serves the league's long-term interests, not because of optics, not because of the media pressure, but because the data confirmed last season and the current national attention on this story confirms right now that the WNBA's window of mass commercial relevance is entirely contingent on Caitlin Clark's presence, health, and safety on the court. Every failure to protect that is a failure to protect the league itself. Every missed call that allows physical targeting to go unpenalized communicates to every player in that league exactly what the acceptable cost of going after the sport's most prominent player actually is. And what a one-game suspension and a silent commissioner communicates is that the cost is minimal, manageable, worth it. That is not the message a league with this much to lose should be sending. It is not the message a league that just signed a $2.2 billion media deal can afford to send. And it is not the message that a league claiming to take player safety seriously can continue to send while two of its referees are being discussed on Fox News and the commissioner's office remains absent from the conversation. The officials have been identified, the incident is documented, the coverage is national, the clock is running, and right now, the WNBA is choosing, through its silence, what side of history it ends up on. Everything that follows will be shaped by what it decides to do next.